Hey guys, so today I want to talk to you about Lightwish Madisi Watercolors. Some people here on YouTube have been comparing these to Kuretake Gansai Tambi, and I wanted to crack the code and see if that comparison is apt. So if you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I am a comic artist and illustrator. I make the comics 7-inch Kara, which you can read at 7inchkara.com, and I review watercolors on the internet. So I hope you guys enjoy what I have to say today, and I hope you guys will stick around. Okay, look guys, I try to work my way through my backlog and I try to be fairly timely about it, but sometimes too much time has passed and I don't necessarily remember what this was sold to me as. So I'm gonna do my best. On the Amazon little sticker, it says Lightwish Professional Watercolor Set for Adults. It's a 24 color set. It came probably in an Amazon box and then also in this bubble wrap. I will dig up provenance for you guys as we go, but I got tired of this staring at me in my to be reviewed pantry and decided, okay, it's time. And to be fair to me, part of the reason it took me so long to get to this one is because I've been sick from November until like recently. So I've had to kind of change how much I can do. And then with the holidays and all, you know, you have other things to talk about here on the channel. So it got away from me a little bit, but hopefully we can get to this today. So this is from Madisi. This is a brand I'm not familiar with. It looks like a Chinese brand. It comes in a fairly nice cardboard box. They promise nano watercolor, and it is made by Suzhou Bingjin. Oh my gosh, I am so sorry, you guys. Suzhou Bingjin Stationery Company Limited. And this is a brand that I'm actually not familiar with. And we can find out more at mds7.com, which, if you guys are familiar with my watercolor reviews for brands that we're not familiar with, I will be doing just that. It seems like the shrink wrap. Aha. Ooh, actually, this is kind of exciting. Okay, now I think I might remember this. All right. Okay. So let me calm myself down. So inside, we don't have tubes. We don't have pans. We have Gansai style pans, which is really exciting because I've been really liking Chinese Gansai style. What is it? Gucai. You guys corrected me in the Paul Rubens video, and I appreciate that. And I read your comments, and my brain is like a sieve, and it is gone. Anyway, those kind of paints. So I'm actually really excited about this today, partially because it means I am not going to have to decant these into half pans. I can just like go ahead and swatch them here. Also, because you guys seem to like these videos, so that's exciting for me. But also because I kind of like these videos and I kind of like these kind of paints. And I don't know, it's like a whole area of the market that hasn't been done to death here in the US. And I actually have a few other Paul Rubens pan styles to talk about with you guys. So this might spin off its own series instead of just either student grade showdown or professional watercolor reviews, depending on how I feel about these. Okay, so we have 24 pans of paint. The lid has a sheet of possibly watercolor, it's watercolor paper, but cotton rag watercolor paper. But it's actually a paper appropriate to swatch on. I like that attention to detail. We have a plastic liner in here, and it's in here. Okay. Come on. Yes, come to mama. Yes, okay. All right, so a thin plastic liner. This is really thin, flocked plastic. There's definitely a chemically smell to it. And then we have our pans. And they look very similar to Gansai style watercolors. We also have some brushes. I'm not excited about these brushes. I don't think I bought this for these brushes. I kind of don't want to have to review these brushes. They're gonna be crummy. I will probably give a really brief demo of the brushes. And that's that. Like, it's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. This is being sold in the US through Lightwish white labels a lot of things. I have bought Supervision watercolors through Lightwish. I have bought Marie's watercolors through Lightwish. So Lightwish is just kind of how they're being distributed on Amazon, but the real brand seems to be Madisi. If you are new here, hi, hello, welcome. I'm Becca Hilburn. I am a watercolor comic artist and illustrator. I make the comic 7-inch Kara, which you can read at 7inchkara.com. Here are some of my illustrations, just to kind of give you guys an idea of what I do. And what I like to do for fun is I like to review watercolors, and I have been doing so for almost 10 years now. First over on my blog at natosoup.blogspot.com, that is since defunct, and for almost 10 years here on YouTube. I started doing tutorials in like 2015, so we're getting really close to an anniversary there, guys. And I have reviewed so many watercolors, and I just love getting to play with them. I love getting to swatch them. I love getting to talk about them with you guys. I love being able to recommend stuff that's great, and I love being able to warn you away from things that are not good. Because as someone who also teaches art, one of the things that I have found that puts people off of painting is they purchased inexpensive art supplies that were not very good and they struggled to use them. And since I know a lot of you guys are looking for a bargain, regardless of what I say, I do try to review some less expensive watercolors to make sure that I can talk about them with you guys and recommend the good ones when the good ones pop up. Now, one thing I will tell you that I don't think is particularly good are these brushes. I haven't cleaned them yet. I am going to clean them. The handles have a rough lacquer to them. They do feel like they're wood. The ferrules look fairly inexpensive with not a particularly good crimping on them. I did not buy this set for the brushes. I bought this set for the paints, so I'm gonna be more concerned about the paints than the brushes, but I promise I will actually wash out the paints and talk about the brushes since they did come with the set. Now, usually with a new brand, I would spend some time going to the website, talking about the brand, talking about what they make. MDS7.com, which I just put this back in here. Let's see if I can find a way to cheese it. Let's see. MDS7.com. Okay, yeah. So it says that it's inaccessible. They haven't obtained an ICP filing. However, they do have an Amazon.com listing. So let's head on over there. Okay, so this looks is golf pencils and number 2 pencils and pictures of smiling white kids, and it looks like they mostly do inexpensive bulk art supplies, at least for the US facing market. So I'm gonna track down the original listing for these watercolors and see if that'll provide a little bit more information. So here's the original listing. Lightwish watercolor paint set, full pan, 24 colors, solid watercolor with 6 brush pins. Art supplies for beginners, students, and artists. We could visit the Lightwish store. It was not the art included that sold me on this. It's never the art included that sells me on it unless I know for a fact that that was made with these watercolors. So these are digital swatches of what we can hopefully expect. We will find out today if that is the case. They also show that these are larger Gansai style pans. That looks like generative AI. That also looks like it might be generative. I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying at least it looks like digital art. I think it kind of looks like generative AI. And then here are our paints, and then here are our brushes. So this is a $25.99 set. It promises large full pans, flexible techniques, rich and vibrant color, versatile brush set, beautiful packaging, ideal for gift giving. So when we're swatching these and we're doing the mud test, we should see some beautiful dispersed blending because that's what they're promising. The form is gel. And you can see these are actually becoming pretty popular on the market, and I do have a few other sets that I want to talk about with you guys. And generally, I don't really review or read the reviews before I take a look at it. I don't want to bias myself. I'm just going to scroll really quickly. You guys can look if you want to look, but I may or may not come back to it. So honestly, not a lot of information, no pigment information, no light fastness information. Who knows what we're dealing with today? So what I'm hoping to do today is I am hoping to swatch all 24 of these on their swatches. I also want to swatch these on a cotton rag watercolor paper. I want to do color mixing. I want to do a wet into wet mud test to see how that shakes out. I may or may not compare these to other brands. It really kind of depends on what the swatching tells me. I'm already kind of thinking about pulling out the Paul Rubens Gucci pans. I'm already thinking about pulling out Kuretake Gansai Tambi pans. We will see. I kind of want to see what these tell me. If these are just terrible, I will probably wrap up the video after we do the wet into wet test with my pros and my cons. If I think there's potential here though, I will do a field test and try to paint a watercolor illustration of some sort with these, particularly if inspiration strikes. You guys might get two. Sometimes I do a bookmark and I do a field test, but I also want to clear the sizing out of these and play around with these a little bit on my Buddha board just to see how they handle. I already don't love, like, I don't love the feel of the handle. However, if they're not bad, I may donate them to my library because their brushes are wrecked. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to clear the sizing out of these. So there was a lot of sizing in these, but I think these are actually a natural fiber. A little stiff for squirrel, but they might be squirrel, and they come to surprisingly good points for how cheap the handle is. So I don't know. I figure though we can do the brushes first, get that out of the way, and then we can talk about the watercolors. So to test out the brushes, I figure why not use this thing that I got from Five Below a while back, and I have been using it to test brushes or demonstrate brushes ever since. Yay for the knockoff Buddha board. So here are our brushes. They actually come in a decent range of sizes, and they are all rounds, and honestly they seem okay. We will find out by swatching them. So I'm just going to work size order going down, starting with a 6. It's actually pretty large for a 6, but let's be real. Watercolor brushes are like women's pants sizes. There's no consistency. It's all right, actually. I think it might be squirrel. It could also be a fiber popularly used in Chinese watercolor. Chinese watercolor brushes. So it could be. I was gonna say it could be weasel, and it might be. It's all right, actually. I don't mind it. It's decently soft. It has good flex. It comes to a good point. I'm surprised, honestly. Usually, if the handle and the ferrule are not great, then the fibers at the top are going to be trash. These are surprisingly decent. I would hazard a guess that this is meant to be their actual student grade for like tweens and teens age to paint with. Good. Not the best quality, but good. And if this is the case, if these are designed for student painters, I really have to say, America, you need to look at this and take notes, because the things made for students and kids in this country are usually just poor quality and overpriced. This is a size 5, whereas these are all right. You could actually paint something with these. I have swatched so much worse for you guys. Now, would I do a field test with these? Maybe. My real problem with these is not the fibers. They're doing really well, surprisingly. It's the I'm not sure if I would find the ferrule and the handle to be irritating. That said, they're not terribly balanced. I think it's just the finish on the handle that I don't like. Also, these are not drippy. Like, this thing is saturated and it is not dripping. I wish I had like something that I could roll this to make a point with and not wreck the belly. I mean, they are solid. Now, would I recommend these over what you probably already have? Not necessarily. But if you wanted to give, so far, if you wanted to give a watercolor set that included brushes that they could immediately start using, this might be it. And that took me by surprise because I really thought these were going to go in the trash like immediately, and they're not bad. Now that said, I don't know if, other than for my students to use, if there's a reason for me to hold on to these, because I have a lot of brushes that I like better. Okay, this one's kind of a, let's see if we can get it to come to a point. But the thing that threw me was the sizing in these, and then at the very tips, they were all like splayed out, like they'd gotten kind of busted in travel. And I was like, these are gonna be awful. No, they're okay. In fact, with some conditioning, they could be even better. I mean, it's not gonna fix the ferrule and the, oh yeah, this size 1 is gonna be the, I think it's gonna be the worst one, but that's okay. These are, like I said, already better than what I was expecting. Now, I've reviewed a good number of watercolor brushes here on the channel, so if you're looking for something else, check the description. I'll link those. But I think these passed the test. I think at the very least, I'm going to use these to swatch those watercolors, because why not? It'll give us some more mileage with these. So next, I want to swatch on the lid. And I feel like, while I don't think the art shown with these watercolors was made with these watercolors, I think Lightwish is implying that you can use this not necessarily like you would a Gansai or a Gucci or a traditional Chinese watercolor, but more like a Western style formulation. So sometimes when I'm reviewing these kind of watercolors, I'll pull out some ripe Sean and swatch on that as well. Let's do these initial swatches and see. So to start out with, when it comes to Gansai, I usually, pre-activating these is usually not the way to go. They get really soupy. So I'm just gonna try going straight in with the swatches.
The colors in this set are titanium white, lemon yellow, yellow pale, garcinia, yellow ochre, orange yellow, vermilion, scarlet, rose, crimson red, brilliant purple, burnt sienna, burnt umber, portrait tone, green pale, sap green, deep green, phthalo green, cerulean blue, cobalt blue, blue lotus, ultramarine, Prussian blue, and black. The paints are surprisingly all right. Quick activation, no scrubbing. It'll be interesting to see these on cotton rag.
These are surprisingly all right so far. I have reviewed a lot of, let's be real, landfill during the student grade showdown, just stuff that was abysmally bad. So when something inexpensive is pretty good, I'm always kind of shocked. All right, y'all, we got to try these out on a cotton rag paper. Now, one thing is they definitely muddy the water. That's not unusual for Gansai style, and these are not a Gansai, I'm saying Gansai style watercolors. And also there's probably a good amount of optical brighteners in these. Just look how they show up in the pans. Very bright, very brilliant. There's a couple colors where you probably couldn't tell what color they were, but most of these, I think there's probably some optical brighteners. This is also pretty not uncommon for Gansai style paints or they have like a larger particle size, so they muddy quicker, that kind of thing. So that's not necessarily a problem. I'm just pointing it out so that we're aware of it for the time being. If you're old here on my channel, then you will already recognize what we're going to be swatching on. We're going to be swatching on Blick's Premier Cotton Cold Press watercolor paper. It is block bound, so we don't have to stretch it. It'll hold it nice and tight while we're swatching, so we're not going to have any buckling or kipping. I have 24 colors to swatch today. So I'm going to lay down a couple of opacity test lines using an alcohol marker. Sometimes watercolors cause alcohol marker to do funny things, but it's still a good test for opacity. Now, we are going to be looking for opacity. We're going to be looking for granulation. We're going to be looking at how the colors wash out. Do they just immediately fill the area, or do they slowly diffuse? Then we're going to move on to color mixing. We're going to do two types. We're going to do atomic, and we're going to do optical. Atomic is when you take two colors and you smash them together to make a second color, aka primaries and secondaries. And optical is glazing, where you glaze one color on top of another color and you should get a secondary color, thus mixed optically. We are also going to do what is called the mud test. That is where I take an area, maybe it's going to be on this block, maybe not, and I saturate it with water and I carefully dab in colors and we see what sort of magic happens. Usually it's a disaster, not magic, but basically these tests will help me figure out how these watercolors will handle when painting, and it'll help me decide whether or not I want to do a field test. Once it is dried, we're also going to do the lift test. Some colors lift more than others. It is not indicative of paints being poor quality or wonderful quality any particular way. And honestly, we're looking for a variety of things, okay? Not all colors should be granulating. Some should be staining, some should be granulating. There's some colors that are commonly granulating, like ultramarine blue, although with Asian watercolors, like Japanese watercolors, often those are more finely milled than Western style watercolors. So your mileage may vary. When it comes to lifting, typically granulating colors are more lifting than staining colors. So in general, we want to see a variety of liftabilities. Not all colors should have the same degree of lifting. That is not always the case, and sometimes it's entirely up to the binder, as well as how humid it is that evening. All right, are you guys ready? Did I throw enough information at you guys? Let's go ahead and get started. I lied to you. Before we get in too deep, I do want to point out that you guys might have noticed there has not been a sponsorship ad or a sponsorship read, and that is because I don't have outside sponsors. Reviews like this are made possible thanks to the generosity of my amazing patrons on Patreon. If you enjoy these kind of reviews and you want me to be able to continue to do these kind of reviews, you should know that I buy most of the things that I review here on the channel with funds from my Patreon or funds that I have earned through teaching. So if you want to help me continue to do what I do, you can join me on Patreon at patreon.com/natosoup, or if you can't afford to right now, you can always join as a free follower, and that way you never miss any updates. And I do share some semi-exclusive exclusive to Patreon goodies, let's say, from time to time, that even free members will have access to.
These paints offer quick, immediate color, but it seems to flood the area. It may be too small of a wash area though to really tell. Some of the colors seem a little bit lighter than I'd expect. I'm not sure if it's just me or maybe the inclusion of optical brighteners or extenders. I was expecting more on the cotton rag, so I am a little bit disappointed, and you guys can see from the close-up how it floods the wash area.
right, a little bit underwhelmed with these on watercolor paper. They're still better than I expected, but you know, I think I need to put them through some more paces, give them more of a chance. So it's time for color mixing. We are going to start by applying our lines for our optical mixing. And that way I can give them a chance to dry. And then we can move on to our atomic mixing. So basically, I am selecting that went everywhere, but you can see it also kind of turns soupy if you leave water on it. So I am selecting 2 of each type of color. So a warm yellow, a cool yellow, get all the paint out of the brush, a warm red, and then a cool red. This is basically a pink, but I think that'll work. And then a warm blue. Good thing I have my swatches that I can refer to, because some of these are actually pretty dark and it's hard to tell in mass tone what they are.
A little bit of a recording goof there where you guys missed seeing me put down the lines for optical mixing as well as missed some of the color mixing. So we're going to start with talking about atomic mixing. We're able to get some decent secondary mixes, but it's really easy to pick up way too much paint, especially if the water has been sitting on the pan, like from swatching. So you're going to be prone to wasting paint. It's easy to mix some vibrant greens, oranges, and purples, some good browns as well. While this set already has some browns, it's always nice to be able to mix custom colors. It'll be interesting to see how vibrant these stay after drying. As for optical, there might be a little bit of melting, but not too much. The colors remain strong and visible beneath the second layer, creating a third color, which is what we want.
We are moving right along. Next up is the wet into wet test. I'm going to do it in that little rectangle down here.
These colors don't really move around a lot. They're pretty stiff and there isn't a lot of diffusion, so there probably isn't a lot of oxgall in these, if any. I'm not seeing any scaling, but I'm also not seeing much granulation. The colors have a samey feel to them, which makes them a little bit boring to me.
Alright, so now that we have wrapped up the wet into wet test, I want to comparison swatch these against Paul Rubens. Now, in the Paul Rubens Gucci video, I comparison swatch those against Kuretake Gansai Tambi. So if you're curious about how those shake out, make sure you check the description below for the link. So this calls for another sheet or another pad of our Blick cotton rag cold press watercolor paper. It's a good thing I have these in handy, if only if I could buy them in bulk. All right, so here is our Madisi set of, or Madisi set of watercolors. And here are the Paul Rubens Gucci watercolors. So you can see they look somewhat similar, at least, you know, at first glance. So similar pans. This one has color name and color number on the back. They also have like kind of a custom case. These, it's sort of custom. I guess that's hard to explain. I think the Paul Rubens might be a little fuller than the Madisi. I thought the Paul Rubens had a Jaune Brilliant or like a skin tone, and I'm not actually seeing it. This set though does have a skin tone. This is a, I think this is a, let me check. How many are in here? Don't make me count. This is a 24 set. This is a 36 color set. So we are going to have colors and color types in this set that would not be in this set. And we already see to have a color in this set that doesn't appear to be in this set. So it'll be interesting to compare. Paul Rubens is also a Chinese watercolor company. So I feel like we are comparing apples to apples here. I would bet though that these are probably meant to be more of a student grade option as opposed to these which are meant to be more of a professional grade option. So let us start with the Lightwish / Madisi Gucci watercolors. They don't call themselves Gucci. That's me calling them that.
I'm going to re-swatch the Lightwish colors so that you guys can have a side-to-side comparison. We're using cotton rag paper for this again, and I've put down 2 opacity lines. I want to make sure that I put down enough color that you can really see it, and that way you can really compare it against the Paul Rubens watercolors. If you're interested in seeing the Gucci watercolors compared against Kuretake, I hope you will watch my Paul Rubens Gucci review. I will have it linked for you guys down in the description below. For the Paul Rubens, I did end up running out of room because there's 36 colors in this set rather than 24, but I tried to make sure that I swatched all of the relevant colors. You can see that the Paul Rubens has a lot more granulating colors than the Madisi set. The Madisi also appears to be either very finely ground or perhaps dye-based or a combination of the two. The colors are similar in terms of saturation, and there are very similar colors between the two sets, although not exactly the same. I think the Paul Rubens set has better neutrals.
So one thing I've noticed with these comparative swatches, and these are the Madisi over here on the left, and then over on the right are the Paul Rubens Gucci, is that these have like, even the granulating colors, the colors that should granulate out, there's really no granulation. Everything is very, very finely milled. It kind of makes me wonder if these might be dye-based. Whereas with Paul Rubens, you can actually see several colors have some granulation, they have some texture to them, which is what we want to see. We want to see some variation when we're working with different pigments. So I'm kind of on the fence about these. I was really excited about them once I got the sizing out of the brushes and I saw that, oh, hey, these might be okay. But, you know, there's just like hiccups along the way that are like, I mean, yes, they do paint. Yes, they do have bright colors. I'm not currently saying, hey, don't buy these. It's really just, I'm debating with myself, basically. So I still need to do the lift test. Just put it here so you know which ones we're talking about. I have a clean cup of water. I have a cotton synthetic that should provide just enough resistance so that we can see if these will lift at all. I'm still trying to decide whether or not I want to do a field test with these or whether or not I want to go into pros and cons. And I'm kind of torn because I feel like I just don't have enough information to really do pros and cons with you guys. But I'm also not necessarily loving these enough to want to do a field test with them.
These paints do not really lift. Now at this point, I was really not feeling these. I felt like maybe I'd become kind of spoiled when it came to Gansai style watercolor. These really goop up on the brush, so you end up wasting a lot of paint. Color control can be challenging because of this. These also dry very desaturated.
None of these colors lifted. They are all pretty staining on there, which really kind of reminds me of dye-based watercolors. Now, I don't know if these are dye-based watercolors, but there was no pamphlet, there was no explanation of how these colors are made, there was no information on Amazon about the production for these, and some companies will choose to share that information. There's no pigment information. So it's not looking, other than the price, it's not looking super hopeful. So this is kind of an editor's note here. I'm trying to collect more information about these paints. So I've been Googling around to see if I can find more information about these paints. And of course, DuckDuckGo brings up a lot of other YouTubers who have reviewed these paints and who have had these paints sent to them by Lightwish. And a lot of them are saying that they're very give me a second, actually. Let me go back and read it to you guys. Sorry, my brain is a little tired. Okay, you get titles like Better Than Kuretake Gansai Tambi. I did not compare these to Kuretake Gansai Tambi. I compared them, as you guys just saw, to the Paul Rubens Gucci, which I compared in the past to Gansai Tambi. And I felt that those were actually pretty similar. These are not a fake comparison with Gansai Tambi. Like, just to be real, like, spoilers or whatever, because I haven't field tested these. These are not comparable to the Gansai Tambi. They're just not the same quality of paint. So far, they're fine. You know, you can mix colors. You can do some wet into wet, although they're incredibly stodgy. You can do color layering and it doesn't have like a bunch of it picking up and dragging. You cannot lift these, which is, you know, honestly not super surprising for this style of a product, but these are not, in my opinion, comparable to Gansai Tambi. And I know that's kind of like meant to be a little clickbaity, just to get people to watch it. And I get that, but like, full disclosure, I bought these out of my pocket with real money. They weren't sent to me, and these are not a replacement for Gansai Tambi.
Before I start the field test, I want to create a palette map to make it easier to find colors as I'm painting. So since these are larger pans, I'm going in with a larger watercolor brush and just doing a large swatch out so you can really see the color on this. printable line art for this daylily bouquet illustration was shared with my patrons over on Patreon. If you'd like to paint along with me, you can access it at patreon.com/natosoup. My patrons have access to it for free, as well as hundreds of other printable line arts and coloring sheets. So if you enjoy coloring or painting, you may want to join me at Patreon. I wanted to start out with some fun color movement, so I'm doing a pour over watercolor technique and then picking up the excess water so that it doesn't take forever to dry and so that we don't have too much opaque watercolor on the paper from the start. This is kind of a good way to get over the fear of the blank page because it's no longer blank anymore. But I also really love seeing how local color looks on top of these pour over effects. This is what those drips and splatters look like after they dried. I'm pretty happy with them. Actually, they're not too muddy. We still have some distinct colors, some yellows, some greens, and some oranges. So now it's time to start painting the bouquet itself. And I did notice that there was some color movement as I layered very wet washes on top of the pour over technique. And keep in mind, the pour over had dried out fully. Color control is really important with these paints because it is very easy to pick up way too much paint and pollute your wash water or just to waste paint. I am noticing some of the paint melting when I'm paint on top of it. And some of the colors just seem to disappear, like the yellow green and the green gold at the center of the daylily, which you guys will see in a little bit. For now, I'm just kind of blocking in the colors, figuring out where I want things to be. I am working from reference, although this was a bouquet that was kind of put together from imagination. So I was referencing several different flowers, but I kind of arranged them rather than working from a specific photo, if that makes sense. So I'm pulling up several different flowers and referencing their colors and their structure as I'm painting this. Now, as I work on the field test, I want to point out that my field test notes and where I'm at in the painting in this time lapse, they are not one-to-one. This is not meant to be a tutorial. It's really meant to be like a visual representation of how these paints handle, so you guys can make an informed purchasing decision about whether these are going to be a good fit for you. And I may be ahead or behind in what I'm talking about in my notes as compared to the video, because it's really just meant to be a visual to kind of give you guys an idea. And it's also meant to give me some concrete points to talk about when I'm talking about these paints. So this isn't really meant to be a tutorial. If you are looking for watercolor tutorials, I do have several here on the channel that I sincerely hope that you'll check out. If you are new to watercolor, I recommend my Watercolor Crash Course series. It is free. It is designed to get you painting, but I have loads of tutorials on drawing and painting flowers and drawing and painting people that I hope you guys will enjoy. These watercolors muddy the water very quickly, so you're going to want to do a lot of water changes if you want clean colors. I know some folks have the space to have 2 water cups when they're painting, one for clean and one for dirty. I love that. I don't have that kind of room, so what I do is just frequent water changes. I'm not sure if these paints would really take like intense techniques. Keep in mind, they don't lift very well. And I've noticed that some YouTubers compare these to Kuretake Gansai Tambi. I think that is kind of a stretch. These are very different watercolors. These perform better than I initially expected because I was expecting trash, but not as well as the Kuretake Gansai Tambi or the Paul Rubens Gucci due to the melting and disappearing colors. You just don't get the color layering. I don't think these are really formulated the way Gansai and Gucci paints are formulated, so they are going to perform a little bit differently. These lose a decent amount of saturation when they dry, and they're not as opaque as I expected, which does allow for more layering than I initially expected, but is one of the reasons I say these don't perform the way Kuretake Gansai Tambi or Paul Rubens perform. These really aren't like a Gansai, as real Gansai tends to stay put and not reactivate once it's dried. These are more like the Meiliang Pigments watercolors. I'm kind of surprised that these haven't turned to mud with all the layering and all the working and the back and forth that I end up doing for this illustration, so I will give them credit for that. I will also give these Lightwish watercolors this. These are fun to paint with. They handle kind of like Meiliang, although it's harder to build up contrast. They layer decently well, and you can see the previous layers through them, as you guys will see later on, but they do reactivate if you glaze a lot of water on top of them, so be aware of that. They also melt a bit. I do end up spritzing them with water a little bit later on to encourage some color movement to break up some of the brush strokes. I don't want to overwork this piece since the colors are so bright, but I did want some color movement and some chaos. These paints really don't deliver a lot of granulation, which would have been a fun touch with some of the blues and the purples. However, I do like these better than the case for making watercolors, which that video is already live on the channel if you guys are curious. They are very different watercolors. I just happened to review both of them like one after the other. It was just a happen chance of working through my backlog, and I wasn't really impressed with the case for making watercolors. Those are handmade watercolors made by a shop in California, and if you're curious about those, I hope you guys will check that video out. But they're very different watercolors, but I just happened to review them in sequence. And also this set is way less expensive than the case for making watercolors. So if you're looking for some decent budget watercolors that have a large open pan size, these could be a good fit, but I will continue to reiterate, they're not providing any pigment info. They're not providing any formulation info. They didn't provide any info at all. They don't seem to be formulated like Gansai watercolors or like Gucci watercolors. So don't expect that. And that's why I don't think, other than the pan size, and there are plenty of companies that are now offering extra large pans, but other than the pan size, I don't really think it's a good comparison against Kuretake's Gansai Tambi because they're just formulated very differently. So don't expect to be able to do those kind of techniques with these kind of watercolors. That said, they are fully capable of pour techniques, of layering, of wet into wet techniques. They're just a little bit stodgy. The color saturation isn't like super great. So if you wanted to go back over and do some dry over dry to like do like a yellow rim or a highlight, these are not really great at that. But again, they're capable of like most basic watercolor techniques, at least on a cotton rag paper, which, speaking of, I am painting on Arches cold press watercolor paper, which is what I use for most of these field tests, unless I say otherwise. It gives us a standard point of comparison. Here's a close-up on that daylily just to kind of show you guys how some of the colors seem to melt. So you don't really get to see like the distinct pour over in the background, which would have been fun. I also did a pour over technique when I was testing out the Paul Rubens paint. So you know, that might also be another reason why I opted to do it. It's a fun technique, and I really like how the color chaos works with a more rendered painting. You guys can also see me dabbing in some wet into wet so that we get some color diffusion. And you will also note I'm not using their brushes. There's something about the balance of their brushes that are really kind of painful for my hands. I have arthritis and arthralgia from Sjogren's syndrome. So, you know, working with brushes that are comfortable for me is important. And I also have like medical tape grips on my brushes because it kind of bulks them up and it makes them easier to work with. I have a whole video where I talk about working with comfort grips for your drawing tools, whether it's pencils or styluses or brushes. And it's really important that I work with comfort grips since I'm disabled at this point. So if you're having hand pain and you're looking for suggestions on things you can do to help with that hand pain, I hope you guys will check out the comfort grip video. I think it's a good one and I think it's really helpful. But yeah, that's why I'm not working with their brushes. I personally found their brushes kind of challenging to use in that they hurt my hands, but I also have hand health issues. Their brushes, as we talked about earlier, are not terrible. The balance is just not great. The fibers in the brushes themselves are surprisingly good. It's just that the ferrule and the wood are rather light and not particularly comfortable in the hand. So while these watercolors are not super saturated and you're not going to get a lot of opacity out of them, they do have enough opacity that when you paint several layers fairly thickly, they start to kind of obscure the line art. So I did want to re-ink it. I'll show you that in a bit. Here's actually the spritz technique that I was talking about earlier, just to kind of break up some of the brush strokes and to get a little bit more chaos going on and a little bit more movement going on. But I did end up re-inking this piece a bit, as you guys will see, just to kind of bring back some of that definition and bring back some of the contrast so that it wouldn't look so muddy. All in all, I was surprised and impressed by how these handled for the field test. I was kind of worried that I would end up painting garbage, and they handled a lot better than I expected. They're fairly similar, I would say, to the Maybelline Pigments watercolors, but you get a larger pan size, so that may be easier for some people to work with. They do take up more desk space as well, and I think you don't get as many colors. This is a 24 color set as opposed to commonly 36 and 48 colors with the Maybelline Pigment. So it's just another option. Depending on how large you paint, depending on what kind of things you paint, depending on your needs as an artist, this could be another alternative for that. I did find these on Amazon, and I realized a lot of people, myself included, are trying to boycott Amazon. This is from my backlog. So I hope you guys watch this anyway, if only to hang out and for some distraction and, for a little bit of entertainment. And maybe just to know a thing about a different kind of watercolor. So yeah, all in all, these performed a lot better than I expected them to perform. Do I recommend them? The price is pretty good, but they're not necessarily exceptional. But we're going to talk about more. We're going to talk more about that in a moment.
So these Lightwish watercolors are $23.99 on Amazon. Kuretake Gansai Tambi is $28.50 at 29% off on Amazon. And the MozArt Komorebi set, which is a set I reviewed years ago and I still really like, and I think it's very comparable to this set. That is a 40 color set, and that is $18.88 on Amazon. So these Lightwish watercolors are only a few dollars different from the Kuretake Gansai Tambi that people like to compare them to. All right, my dears, we are almost finished. It is time to talk pros and cons, and we're going to start on a positive note. These handled a lot better than I expected of them. The large pans are easy to get into, easy to pull paint from, and they don't seem to get used up super fast. They are also very easy to activate, deliver a lot of saturated color, and in general, I am able to do the kind of watercolor techniques that I want to be able to do. I'm able to do pour overs, I'm able to do wet into wet, I'm able to do layering and glazing to a certain amount. I'm able to do spray techniques and get some reactivation and get some movement. So they do in general handle like most watercolors. In fact, I would say they handle fairly similarly to a student grade like the Meliang pigments. The cons are, I believe that this set is only sold through Amazon, so if you're boycotting Amazon, these are not really an option, whereas Kuretake is sold by almost every art retailer, so you have lots of options, including plenty of brick and mortars. The setup, the box set that these come in, takes up a lot of desk space, so it may not be ideal for those with smaller workspaces. The paints will glob up on your brush while you're working, wasting paint and polluting your water. A mixing surface is a must with these paint. These are also just not as, so with a Gansai paint, because it uses an animal hide glue, once it's dried on the paper, it's pretty much dried on the paper. So it can be really great if you like to do glazes and glazes and glazes and you don't want reactivation. Whereas these definitely had problems with reactivation and movement, and you know, in some instances I could use that to my advantage, but in some instances I found it hard to get the kind of techniques I was really hoping to achieve with these. For example, this was painted with Paul Rubens Gucci paints, which are pretty similar in terms of binder to, say, the Gansai style paints, and I was able to do a lot of layering without there being a lot of reactivation. Also, Gansai style paints are a little bit more opaque than what I noticed with these paints. And that's not necessarily a problem. As you notice, I had to re-ink this. I had to re-ink this. It's just something to be aware of when you're painting. You may choose to pencil instead of ink, or you may decide that you want to re-ink your piece for clarity. It's just good to have options. But these really didn't muddy the liner as much as I was expecting, which is both a good and bad thing. They didn't have the opacity that I was hoping they would. I tried to do some techniques where I worked back in and tried to add kind of an opaque gouache-like detail, dry over dry, and it just didn't really hold up that well. So these don't have a whole lot of oomph to them if you were to compare them to a Gansai or Gucci paint, but they are a lot of fun to paint with. So now it is time for the verdict. These are fine. I purchased this set out of pocket. They were not sent to me. I feel like these are very usable with a few minor flaws, and they could be a good option for a newer painter, but I would not necessarily give them to a child artist as they may contain toxic materials. There's no paperwork explaining what's in these paints, so I would recommend that you err on the side of caution. That said, they do seem like they're manufactured by a Chinese school supply brand, so they may be fine. If you have any experience with these and can give me more information about them, I would love that. Please let me know in the comments. I tried to dig up more about the paint specifically and just could not really find anything. They're fairly affordable. They offer a lot of paint. They can handle layering and reworking, and they offer vibrant color. That said, just because they look like a Gansai does not mean they handle like a Gansai, and these are far more reactivatable even after fully drying than Gansai style paints. That said, you can definitely live without these paints. I know some of you guys who watch my channel collect paints, so I'm not talking to you, but please, I hope you do not get FOMO from this video. You are absolutely not missing out if you decide these paints are not a good fit for you. So I had a lot of fun playing with these watercolors. Originally I didn't really like them, and then I actually field tested them, and I felt like they were pretty fun. They're fairly inexpensive, you get large pans, and you get really bright, brilliant color. Now, they are fairly lifting, they're not really a Gansai, and I don't think it's really fair to compare them to Kuretake Gansai Tambi, although I do understand the clickbaity title. So I would say that if you want watercolors that offer space for a larger brush, if you want to paint bigger and you're looking for a student grade option, these could be a perfect fit for you. Now, as for the brushes were fine. I was impressed that they were better than I thought they would be, but I would not buy this set for the brushes. I would recommend procuring some watercolor brushes that you like that will work for you. I happen to like the Royal Langnickel Zen brushes as a very affordable student grade option. All the brushes are $7.99, even the really big ones. So that can be a way to start your watercolor brush collection. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope to see you guys again soon with another art supply review or tutorial. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye guys!